been conducting these contemporary policy-related issues, webinars since the last 3 years. We have done more than 200 webinars by now. As you know, the country is facing a very important question on guaranteed MSP. So keeping the contemporariness in mind, EGROW Foundation has organized this webinar today. We have the best experts of our country speaking to us on the topic. We have been very careful in selecting the speakers for the day. Unfortunately, Professor Parmod, who's the director of Giri Institute, has been hospitalized yesterday, and I don't see him. He has not been able to join today, despite the fact that he was willing in case he is able to leave the hospital, he would have joined, but somehow he can't. So we have Dr. Narendar Pani, Dr. and Professor Gopal Naik, and Dr. C.L. Dadhich. They'll be introduced by the chair of the session today. The session is being chaired by Dr. Ashok Vishandass. He's my colleague, founder director of EGROW Foundation. He has been into policymaking for a very long time. He was the chairman of CSCP before he retired. I would now request Professor Vishandass to take over and conduct the session.
Yes. Thank you, Professor Charan Singh. Thank you, all the distinguished panelists. Let me, before I introduce, let me give a broad perspective of why this subject is very important, MSP. MSP basically has a long history right from 64, 65, when the country has been suffering from the food deficit. So government decided on the basis of certain expert like L.K. Jha and others said you should set up twin institution, the Commission on Agriculture Cost and Prices, which will fix the minimum support price. It started with the fewer crops. It started with one crop, then two, and then it has to be simultaneously another institution called Food Corporation of India for procurement. So these are considered to be twin sisters. One has to fix the minimum support price, other has to procure as a public stocking agency. So this is the background, and at that time, and the purpose of MSP is to ensure that prices do not fall below the minimum support price, and MSP itself is a guarantee by the government, and it gives signal to market what to produce, and farmers have the option to sell those the commodity which now are 23 in number, including sugarcane, which is slightly different because it is controlled by a fair and remunerative price and sugar control order, and to a designated government agency at MSP. Now, this has withstood the test of time right from mid-60s till about 2022. After that, farmers have been demanding this. And let me also add, the government is very sincere. They have constituted a committee chaired by Shri Sanjay Agarwal, who was the former secretary to Government of India and the Ministry of Agriculture. There are many experts. There are farmers representative, and it's about 30 experts and the representative of the farmers who have been in that committee. And the committee's terms of reference is to find out how and to suggest to the government how that can make it more transparent and more scientific. And the government is in the business, and because of complexities are so deep and so wide, the committee has not been able to submit its report to the government, though they have held so many meetings thus far. And I have myself have attended one of those meetings where the deliberation took place in the Krishi Bhavan under the chairmanship of former Secretary Agriculture. So with this is the background. Now we would like to invite our expert, their view, because I find there are a difference of opinion, not only difference of opinion, difference of understanding of the common people. Therefore, as my colleague and CEO of the EGROW, explained why it is necessary. So before I request our expert, let me briefly start with Dr. C.L. Dadhich. He is the Honorary Secretary of Indian Society of Agriculture Economics from 2006 to 2023. During his long outstanding career spanning over 3 decades with Reserve Bank of India, National Bank for Agriculture and Rural Development, National Dairy Development Board, he was associated with the number of working groups and committees appointed by Planning Commission and the Government of India. He provided services on the board of Dot Corporation, LLC, Washington, and as a consultant of World Bank and rural credit expert of RBI, he visited number of Asian, African, and European countries to help development of banks and other research and financial institutions. He has authored a book called Overdues in the Farm Cooperative Credit and Management through Folk Wisdom. Since November 2014, Dr. Dadhich is also editor of Indian Journal of Agriculture Economics. So I now request Dr. C.L. Dadhich to enlighten us with his views on the subject. And after he finishes, we will go to the next expert, and then I will introduce those experts. Over to Dr. C.L. Dadhich. Dadhich, Dr. Dadhich. Vivek,
Please unmute. He's muted.
he is unmuted.
He's
I
mute.
don't. He's mute, but hello, Dr. Dadhich. Okay, Dr. Dadhich, I can see you, and I will request you to start the deliberation.
Thank you, sir. So kind of you. Now I am audible. Hello.
Yes, yes, you are.
Okay, sir.
Yes,
you
yes,
have
you are.
already. Okay, sir. You have already introduced the subject, so I will not go into this subject. I will straightway come. MSP scheme
Yes.
has achieved or made the rapid strides in terms of the number of the commodities and the area covered.
Right.
Actually, also very well in the quantity procured of the total 40 lakh crores value of the agricultural produce of this particular 23 commodities. 2.5 lakhs crore has been procured by the under the MSP. As a result of this, we have self-sufficiency in the food productions, as only in practice only 2 commodities are procured. Then we have a huge buffer stock. We have stabilized the agriculture prices. So there are the achievements, very good achievements of the MSP. Has served the purpose. It is doing very well. Hello. Now coming to the some of the limitations of the MSP. There is a coverage is very limited, because when Santa Kumar committee reported around 6%, now recent situation assessment survey indicates that crop wise the differences, but 8 to 10% is getting the benefits of the MSP. Then only, as I told earlier, only 2 crops. This scheme is only in the limited 6 states only, not in the whole of the country. It has also affected the diversification of the crops, because only 2 crops are procured under the MSP, or as a result, the other crops are not risk-free, so they do not cultivate those crops. I have a paper in the International Agricultural Association long back in 2003, where I indicated that as a result of assured price for these 2 crops, the farmers grow for other crops like pulses oil seed is neglected. I remember in my childhood, when I was a student in my village, the bajra, moong, til, and this milk, everything was available for a 50 paisa per kg. Today, when we go into the prices of the pulses and oilseed, it's very high, whereas wheat and these prices, because the supply has increased. And MSP, in a way, has also controlled the prices. So in this way, the diversification has been affected. Then the other problems related to the ecosystem damage. There had been a damage to the ecosystem. Then there is a lot of discretionary power to the nodal procurement agencies. So that makes many of the farmers, then when they go to the nodal agencies, they reject their crops. And when their crop is rejected, they have to, there is a distress sale they give to the traders, and traders actually after some time, in the cost of the farmer, they sell it to this procurement agency. So this is the biggest limitations of the, so in a way, the traders are dominating the whole show. Then there is of a late, there is a complaint about the unremunerative price, because this the whole price is not covered. Then now second, there is a lack of guarantee also, because the many times the whole produce is not purchased. They purchase up to the extent of the requirement under the PDS. So entire crop is not produced. So now the suggestion is to have the remunerative price and to have the procurement, guaranteed procurement. We should implement the Swaminathan Committee report. We should also have a guaranteed the minimum support price for the farmers. Now coming to the Swaminathan Committee reports, C2 plus 50%. I personally feel C2 should be given the state way, because the item which they have added should be considered. Then instead 50%, if you go for a 50% increase plus 50%, that will create inflation pressure in the country. I feel that in a gradual way, 5 to 10% rise should be given, and over a period of 5 to 10 years, we can give the fulfill the complete requirements. So it should be in a phased manner. Coming to the guaranteed price, guaranteed MPC, I feel that in view of the farmers are not in a very good positions. There are small holdings in the country. It is not only the developed state, also the farmers are not able to, and therefore there is a need that their produce should be only the paddy. It should be up to the extent of our PDS requirements, but other import reduced for the crops. Do that, then there would be diversification, there would be satisfaction with the farmers, and the agriculture will grow in a best manner. There is also then to have the say the advantage of what they traders play, in order to have that all transactions should be at the Inam portal. There nodal agencies should purchase, and farmers who are selling the produce should register themselves in advance with the acreage, so that there won't be any problems of bribe or anything. Those should be not rejections, and there would be a single portal where transactions can take place. Now it is picking up, so it should be nodal agencies should also work through the INAM. Then actually, I think that should be a MS guarantee for the rest of the crops which are under the import list. There is also a study by the CRISIL which indicates that of the total 23 crops, only 16 crops which they have taken into account, which account for a 90 to 80% of the total transactions, of which only 8 crops are under the prices are prevailing below the MSP. So there is a need to purchase those commodities, and then the total expenditure, the investment would be around 6,000 crores of working capital and 21,000. So it will be reasonable. So they also suggest, research team of the CRISIL also suggested that there should be a guaranteed MSP. And if you do that, then there would be a higher income in the rural areas. There would be a demand in the rural areas. Overall economy will get a push, and it would be, the country would be better off. With these words, I just want to close my presentation. So thank you, sir. So kind of you.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Dadhich. It was very useful. Your aversions and your views. May I now turn to Professor Gopal Naik. Gopal Naik is a senior fellow and Jal Jeevan Mission chair professor at the Center of Public Policy, IIM Bangalore. After completing PhD in Agricultural Economics, University of Illinois, he has served as a faculty member of Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad, during 1988 to 2003, and held many administrative positions, including chairperson, Center of Management in Agriculture. He has worked as a professor of economics at IIM Bangalore during 2003 to 2023 and held many administrative positions. He is a fellow program in management and dean faculty. He taught graduate courses on research methodology, econometrics, managerial economics. He works in the area of agriculture policy, agri-business, rural development, and natural resource management. He has published books and research papers in national and international refereed journals. He received Professional Excellence Award in 2007 from the American Agriculture Economics Association. His co-authored paper was awarded the title of Meritorious Paper for its contribution to the practice of electronic governance in the 4th International Conference on the Theory and Practice of Econometric Governance. The team led by him received the WSIS 2015 Award for e-learning. He has been consultant for many public, private, and international organizations and served on various committees in both central and state government and educational institutions. The list is endless. I think I would not stand between his introduction and him, and people are waiting very eagerly to listen to Professor Gopal Naik. Over to Professor Gopal.
Thank you, Ashok, for that long introduction. I will just very briefly make my points. One is, we need to really put this in proper context when we talk about MSP. I think since almost 1990s, when we actually were able to generate surplus in agriculture sector, the focus on agriculture was sort of lost, from the viewpoint of policy and so on. And because of that, there were the investments that were supposed to be made by the government, allocation to be made to the agriculture sector sort of went down. And one can see over a period of time how the proportion of allocation done to agriculture sector has reduced. Because of these, we see certain problems in agriculture, and that sort of gets manifested into, resistance and the demand to address these problems in an ad hoc manner. I'll tell you some of the issues that are there for now for a long time and which needs to be addressed, unless, we address these issues, we will not be able to make farming, remunerative. So one is actually low productivity growth. Over a period of time, we see that the productivity growth has really been very low, and of course, many times it is even negative. So therefore, improving productivity growth is very important, which again relates to agriculture research, extension, cultural practices, and so on. If you compare our, productivity with the other major producers in the world, we find that, these are actually going down. Our agriculture, the ratio is actually going down, which essentially means that we are not really being competitive in the world market. If we were able to, let's say, increase our productivity, we would have been very competitive. Then we would have actually been able to export many of our products. And because of that, the prices would have gone up, and therefore there is no need of MSP. So those are the linkages that I'm trying to make. So yield gaps still exist. Many studies have indicated that yield gaps are there in the agriculture sector. There is declining holding, as Professor Dadhich has correctly mentioned. The holdings are becoming smaller and smaller, and because of that, we will see again, the practices, the cultural practices, the agriculture practices are not really up to the mark, and also the cost goes up, in terms of procurement of inputs and so on. Then that leads to poor cultivation practices, and over a period of time we have also seen degraded soil, increasingly degraded soil, degraded land, as well as water availability because of the groundwater extraction and so on. We see groundwater, the availability of water is also a problem. Added to that, there are also these issues about land titles. Let's say if somebody actually is a tenant, whether he or she can get the agriculture credit or not. So in many cases they are unable to do it because it is not there in the records. Then again, even more recently, we also see that poor credit availability because many of the rural branches are closed, and also the priority sector lending rules are relaxed. So therefore, the banks essentially end up preferring large, loans, which may be like dairy, poultry sector, and so on, but not the small loans, crop loans, and so on. So therefore, there is an increase in the cost of production, but in many cases the output prices have not really increased at the same level. So these are, of course, because of these factors that are mentioned, as well as inefficient, input and output markets. Input markets are also, even today, we see that there is a considerable amount of risks in buying pesticides and so on, whether the quality is good, whether it is adulterated or not, and so on. Similarly, seed market and so on. And in the output market, as all of us know, again, this is not an efficient market because most of the regulated markets do not follow the rules that are actually framed. So these things make it the markets inefficient, and added to that, there are increase in risks because of the climate change, because of globalization, and we also do not have an effective way of managing risks, both instruments, the insurance, as well as the futures market, which was, at the national level, it was sort of rolled out in 2003. They are still yet to come to terms and give an efficient market alternative. So because of these reasons, the farmers are under tremendous pressure. And therefore, they are basically looking for solutions like, whether we can have the MSP or not. But the problem with the MSP, guaranteeing MSP, there are issues. The issues are like, if you have MSP, in order to make it effective, it has to be procured. Now, apart from those that are actually distributed through the public distribution system, it's not easy to really procure and keep it and dispose it of, because the government agencies are not anywhere in the world. They are not good in terms of trading commodities. Buying and selling and taking market opportunities is something which is not really the government's function, and therefore they often, if there is no PDS system, often they end up in making losses, which again comes back to as a burden for producers, consumers, or the taxpayers. The other issue is, if you set MSP high, then there is a problem, because there is a supply response, and therefore there is a lot more production happens, and then there is a surplus generated. And what do you do with the surplus? If you procure it, again, these will be going to stocks, and as we have experienced in 2003, 2004, and so on, there could be huge amount of stocks, and many of it may go waste as well. So therefore, the MSP should be given when there is a PDS system is operating, and also it can be given as an emergency measure in case where the market prices go very very low. So in which case it can be just the cost of production plus at the most the normal profit, what we call in economics a normal profit, which is basically the risk-free rate of interest. So that could be a formula one could use in order to provide MSP. But high MSP, if you say 50% more and so on, that's going to create huge problem. So it can lead to surplus generation where we will not be able to effectively dispose it off, and it will be huge cost to the society. I think that's not a viable solution at all. So that's why we need to be very careful with respect to the MSP. One is, of course, whenever there is wherever PDS system is operating, then for those commodities it's fine. But again, we see that if you look at the cost of production, it varies very large between states. In Punjab, it may be, let's say, some commodities like wheat or rice may be economical to produce, whereas not in Maharashtra. Sometimes you can see the extent of difference is very large. So I was looking at some figure in 2022-23. So if the quintal of paddy cost of production is 808 rupees in Punjab, it's almost like a 2,300 in Maharashtra. So it is to that extent, almost 3 times the cost differences. So therefore, the question again, comes, of course, you can take an average and so on. And therefore, again, it will just, it will not be a very, prudent to produce it in every state or sell it to the, the procurement agencies, because, this may not cover cost in many other states as well. So therefore, I think we need to be careful in actually administering the MSP. And of course, we should look at what other alternatives that we have in order to really take care of the problems in agriculture, rather than just looking at the MSP route. I'll stop at this and maybe come back later on.
Yes, thank you, Professor Gopal. Very wonderful and very pertinent points you have flagged, and I'm sure this will generate further interest. Now I turn my attention to Dr. Narendar Pani. Professor Narendar Pani is an economist by training who takes a multidisciplinary approach to Indian political economy issues. In his effort, he has relied on the method derived from the writings of M.K. Gandhi, that is Mahatma Gandhi, over the last 3.5 decades, he has held position in academia and the media. He was a member of the task force on manufacturing set up by the government of Karnataka in 2013. He was a member of working group set by the Planning Commission to review the performance of Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act. He was a member of the steering committee for the evaluation study, and so many other assignments he has held, and with very great success. And he has won the Citibank Pan Asia Journalist Award for 1992. The award was given for writing on trade issue. The piece that won the award was on environment as a trade barrier. His books include Inclusive Economics, Gandhian Method and Contemporary Policy, Redefining Conservatism, an essay on the basis of India's economic reform and reform to preempt change, land legislation in Karnataka. He is also one of the editors of Bangalore, Imagination and Their Time. So over to Dr. Narendar Pani.
Thank you very much, Dr. Vishandass, and the EGROW Foundation for inviting me to this webinar. I think the issue that has been stated by the chairman as well as others already is the question of how the MSP actually worked and worked very well when it was set up. But that happened primarily because of the basic conditions under which it was operating. That is, you had a food crisis, you had farmers who had to be given credit, by which they could buy a new technology, and once they bought the new technology, they needed a guarantee that their product would be bought. This, the MSP-based system managed extremely well, because as long as there was a deficit, because as long as there's a deficit, you could control what prices, how much subsidy you would give, and you didn't have a problem of unsold stocks. The moment you became a surplus producing country, the stocks began to grow, and that put a pressure on the budget deficit. It also put in a great deal of pressure on the management of the economy itself, because with a fixed price, farmers were no longer efficient. And as Dr. Gopal Naik just pointed out, there are parts of the country where costs have gone through the roof. So once the system has failed and or has began to show cracks, deep cracks, the focus has been to try and get the benefit of the market into the system. But the difficulty here is that in formulating the problem as one of a market, the market is being identified in terms of the products, that it is an agricultural market. But the people involved in it, the farmers and other workers in agriculture, are directly linked to other products as well, to the working in other products. As we saw during the COVID crisis, many of the farmers, short-term migrants in urban centers, went back to the village and went back into farming, right? Even otherwise. So the options available to the farmers is not in farming alone. So if you're looking at the continuation of the farm economy, you cannot do the analysis or look at the market as an agricultural commodity market alone. It's a larger market. The choices before farmers extend where they can move into other areas. And we have already seen this movement out of agriculture is quite substantial. And more than that, it is varied. That the extent of the movement out of agriculture varies from state to state. It's also varied in terms of the terms under which they move. In some cases, as is happening in coastal, or what used to be coastal Andhra Pradesh, now the full state of Andhra Pradesh, is that you have a permanent migration out of agriculture. Whereas if you come to the north and the east, particularly Jharkhand, Bihar, and states like that, you find short-term migration. You leave your family in your village, but you come out, do short-term assignments in urban centers and go back. Once these options are there, if you take a purely agriculture product-based view of the market, you're sending signals to these workers that may drive them out of agriculture altogether. Right? And this problem, when you move from states which are poorer and therefore the options are really in terms of urban work, to the richer states like Punjab in particular, you have a situation where they have global options. In fact, with global warming, You have parts of northern Canada that have become much more cultivable, and they have longer periods of free of frost, etc., which make them much more cultivable, and they need a farming community. And the farmers of Punjab are among the targeted groups. So you have a situation where options or farmers have options. And if we take a purely market-oriented view and you drive them out now, there could be a time in the future when the food situation is not as comfortable as it is today. It is important not to lose sight of that. Just as we have come a long way from the crisis of the mid-60s, we should not allow that to blind us to the possibility that now that we are the most populous nation in the world, it's very possible that you could run into difficulties in the future. You cannot have a situation where you leave agriculture or leave the farmers completely to the market, to the point where the farmers choose to abandon agriculture. Now, that is an issue that at some point will have to be discussed. And I think the basic purpose of any meaningful farm policy cannot be agriculture alone, but must be food security in its larger sense, including what are the options farmers have. Now, when you take this larger view of agriculture, then the role of the MSP is clearly there, in the sense that it allows for a guaranteed price. You can give it only for food crops if you want to be careful about how it's influencing crop selection. And if you want, you can go a step further and say that you can fix the MSP at a certain minimum about the cost, but it will also link it to the availability of stocks. So, which is, while you have different crops, you can have the MSPs for different crops depending on their where this C plus 50% could be one kind of a guideline, but it would have to be linked also to the availability so that you can manage it. But even if you do that, we must remember it is not enough, because agriculture is necessarily constrained by the land available, and as several of the eminent speakers before me have pointed out, that the land size is becoming much smaller. And as it becomes much smaller, it becomes less viable. That becomes so you're not going to be able to compete with earnings from other industries that do not face this land constraint. Right? I'm not just talking about the information technology industry, which can grow at 30% a year without any for years on end. But even other industries have potentially a much higher growth rate than agriculture. So there will be a tendency for people to move out. The issue then is one of ensuring that movement, because if you have this movement out of agriculture, a large movement out of agriculture has, through the history of the world, proved to be extremely difficult socially, from the time of the Industrial Revolution to the Soviet experience with collective farming, whatever route. When you move them out of agriculture, there is always a sense of a problem that emerges there. So there is a need to also manage that process. In order to do that, one would need to look at least some way of trying to generate a system where farmers could move out of agriculture while they continue to get some benefit from the agricultural system. This is happening already, in the sense of, typically farmers, one member of the family will migrate to an urban center and the others will sort of cultivate land, so that they retain a connect with that. But that could be formalized by creating worker cooperatives or farm management cooperatives, where essentially the farms of those who are not, those who are less efficient, who are leaving it fallow, can give the land to these cooperatives so that you get larger farms in effect. So the point one is trying to make is that the problem of MSP cannot be seen as an agricultural problem alone. It's a part of the larger transformation taking place in India from an agrarian economy to a non-agricultural one. We are a country where, unlike elsewhere in the world, when you're moving out of agriculture, a large number of people continue to have houses remaining in agriculture. So I think you need to see the MSP as a problem of the larger transformation of a market economy and not of agriculture, the agricultural product market alone. I'll leave it there and come back if you'd like to discuss.
Yes. Thank you, Professor Pani ji. You raised very interesting point. The agriculture policy should not be just for immediate, but the futuristic. And we have to see, and then implicitly you were saying that the present is no guarantee for the future. So the things which we faced in the mid 60s or late 50s can revisit us. So we have to be creating the walls around us so that we do not face the same consequences. The situation could be similar, but not the consequences we have to change. I fully subscribe to your view, and it's a wonderful, you have thrown the pulse. So wonderful. Now let me raise certain other issues. See, the question arises because I meet so many people, why the farmers are demanding the guarantee? That is a question which we have to see. Now, what caused the farmers to demand this? That is the now at the outset, I acknowledge the farmers are in distress, therefore peeved. Now, the commitment of doubling farmers' income, which was said in 1950, perhaps have gone out of narrative. Let me give two data set points. Now, situation assessment survey of NSS, they show the farmer's income per farmer is about 6,427 in 2012-13, which has increased according to the latest situation assessment survey done by NSSO, was about 10,028 rupees. Now, this has shown that it has increased 59, but 59% increase may look very attractive, but the base was very low. Therefore, I agree that the farmer's income is low, and therefore they are peeved, and therefore they are in distress. But the question is, the prescription that is being prescribed for solving this problem, is that the right medicine? The question is perhaps not, because the MSP is an instrument of pricing, not of income. And if government feels that their income level is low, it can give them the predetermined amount, which can be discussed separately, to the farmers on per hectare basis, subject to exclusion of certain category of farmers who are the legislator, or some kind of those whose income is beyond a threshold. Those small portion can be excluded, but that is in principle one has to consider that, so that the medicine is not worse than the disease. That is my. Now the second point is, why we have landed ourselves in this kind of situation? Because of, to my mind, as our panelists quoted Shanta Kumar committee's finding, which says only 6% farmers are benefiting from this MSP, and now it has increased to about 8.8%, and that itself is very low. So therefore, there is a slack and inefficient procurement machinery have not provided MSP support, and therefore farmers are feeling high and dry, and the prices of farm produce are lowest at the time of peak arrival, and the private traders benefit from this. And in other words, when the prices are violent and fluctuating very violently, especially at the time of peak harvest and market arrival, farmers suffer a great deal of losses. The government procurement at MSP is primarily for paddy and wheat, which is basically required for meeting the requirement under National Food Security Act 2013. The others form a mini, technically every commodity which is in the domain of MSP, those 23 commodity, including FRP for sugarcane, can be procured and should be procured, but the other form a minuscule fraction of the total. Even rice and wheat, which is claimed to be only two commodity which are procured, they are very selective in certain parts of the country, but not the whole nation is covered, and those farmers are left feel that they are excluded. Now, burden of procurement of physical distribution of food grain to 80 crore people would weigh heavily on the policy maker. The question is, what does a guaranteed MSP mean? Legal MSP imply a right-based system, as was done in National Food Security Act. Then a legal guarantee for MSP will only ensure that successive government will not be able to remove the provision of MSP from policy framework, and the system will continue with modification. This could give additional protection for the farmer in the form of a legislative backing for ensuring that MSP regime continues. So that is the root cause of this. And if it is done, it is made mandatory. The minimum price means that no purchaser of these commodity can buy anything less than the declared MSP. Now, difficulty, what are the difficulty before the government in agreeing to the demand for making it guaranteed? Now, MSP, as I said, is an instrument of pricing, not of income. Therefore, the objective of augmenting farmers' income cannot be achieved through the instrument of pricing, which is not the income instrument. So, one of the objectives of the MSP is to give signal to market what to produce, and making it legal would lead to skewed production of commodity that are not demanded by consumer. So one has to move. A demand-driven production can be much more remunerative for the farmers than the production fixed to MSP. And another issue is the natural resources usage. Now, receding water tables from 10 meter to 30 meters is a formidable cause of environmental concern. Guaranteeing MSP will perpetuate cultivation of water-thirsty crops such as paddy, sugarcane. This will decelerate the production of robust, more nutritional and water-friendly crops like millet. Net zero emission, and that would lead to irrational utilization of precious domestic resource costs like water and land. Now, legalizing MSP, it will lead to that fiscal problem, and the risk of over reliance on MSP is visible in the state of Punjab. Just as an example, the agriculture has reached an almost static stage there almost, and the state is unable to diversify away from crops like paddy, which is adversely impacting the natural resource and environment. Apart from this fact, this will distort the entire market. When the private sector does not buy at legal MSP, all the produce that is offered for sale will simply not purchase. Market clearance will not happen, leading to chaotic situation. Now, nowhere in the world, not even the socialist country, this kind of mechanism is working. Now, question is there some kind of semblance of guaranteed MSP in our country, or is there any precedence? Yes, there are. Now, let me also narrate a story. The sugar cane is the only crop for which farmers are getting assured MSP, which is called Fair and Remunerative Price, FRP, across India, as sugar mills are legally required to pay the same. But that's altogether a different ballgame. Similarly, sometime in 2018, in the state of Maharashtra, this guaranteed MSP, a kind of thing, was introduced, but it was faced with a lot of resistance from the trader who boycotted the purchase, and the government has to withdraw the order. The farmers of other crops are demanding a law which guarantee them MSP even when they sell to private trade. Now, what action government has taken? The government of India has set up an expert committee under the chairmanship of former Agriculture Secretary in July 2022 to give recommendation on availability of MSP to farmers of the country by making the system more effective and transparent. Now, one has to mark the wording of these terms of reference of the committee. They have to suggest availability of MSP to farmers in more effective and transparent manner. That means is a admission that is not effective, it's not transparent. So, but somehow the committee has not been able to submit its report. Hopefully they will do, and they must have done. And though they have conducted many meetings, one of those meetings I also have attended as a special invitee. So I have some briefing on this. Now, the terms of reference of committee, however, do not specifically mention legal guarantee for MSP. So whatever be the recommendation, because that is not their terms of reference, we are not expecting they will write something on this or they will give recommendation on this. Now, another interesting issue is on which cost to be taken for MSP. One is the concept of A2 plus FL, other is the C2. Now, what is the difference between C2 and A2 plus FL? In most crops, the difference between C2 and A2 plus FL is about 25% to 30%. Now, if you make your basis of MSP recommendation on C2, which is not done until now, will make a difference of the MSP to 37.5% to 45%, because the cost structure is that. Now, let me also add, there are many people who misquote Dr. Swaminathan's report. They say Swaminathan has recommended C2 cost plus 50%. He has simply said cost plus 50%, not the C2 nor A2 plus FL. It's a government decision to base its recommendation on A2 plus FL, and there are cogent reasons why government has done it. Now, there are many committees like C.H. Hanumanta Rao, Abhijit Sen, Professor Alak, who have recommended the government should concentrate on A2 plus FL, not C2. And the reason is because C2 includes the imputed value of own land and imputed value of interest on own capital. And most economists agree, though very rarely they come to the same point, but there was unanimous decisions, because I have read all those reports of Hanumanta Rao, Abhijit Sen, and including Professor Alak. They say when an enterprise takes place, your own capital is rewarded by the interest, or your own capital and own assets. You don't have to impute its imputed cost of capital or cost of the rental value, because that gets rewarded in the profit. Therefore, it will be double counting. So, in my considered view, A2 plus FL is 50%, and most economists, including Alak, Abhijit Sen, and Hanumanta Rao, they have said, and Dr. Swaminathan has never said C2. So, to me, this is not an issue, though some people are raising this issue. So, MSP at A2 plus FL plus 50%, as is the done, is appropriate. Now, what is the way forward? Way forward is government has to find the comprehensive long-term solution to the problem confronting farmers and their livelihood, climate change, food inflation, and demand of food and nutritional activity. Government has of late proposed 5 years sort of guarantee on 5 specified crops, which include cotton, maize, tur, urad, and masood for 5 years from farmers without any quantitative limit. So this is the sum and substance of what has happened in the past, what is actually done by the CACP, and what is the solution. So I stop here and I request our Professor Charan Singh to see if there is any question, and then the panelists can attempt to answer this.
This is Dr. Vishandass. Must agree that all 4 of you have brought so much of richness to the discussion and so much of clarity. Various viewpoints have been shared, and I must thank each of the panelists for such rich contribution. In the chat box, there are a number of questions, and I would like to pose them and the question that I'm going to read, I'm going to just leave the questions and then you as the chairman can decide what do you want and whom do you want to give it. One is, why not government guaranteed MSP as legal for all the crops? I think that has been partly answered by Dr. Dadhich, but because it is coming again, so I am mentioning if anybody wants to give another clarification. What challenges and obstacles must arise in the implementation of a guaranteed MSP and how can they be addressed? I think you have answered that partially. If not the guaranteed MSP, what are the other ways to address the problems faced by the farmers in India? I think you flagged that issue. And Dr. Pani also flagged that issue and need to look holistically. I think Professor Gopal also mentioned that. Are there any successful case studies or models from different regions that demonstrate the positive or negative outcomes of implementing a guaranteed MSP? And if not guaranteed MSP, is it possible to procure all 23 crops plus other crops, 5 you were mentioning, which is not part of the box as of now for the government? So there are other questions also, but I thought if you could decide of these questions. Okay, then there's one more question I wanted to bring to your notice, and that is, can government incentivize small farmers lease their land on a basic income scheme set by government? This way, large parcels of land can be consolidated and farmed with innovative techniques at scale and increase yield. This is again from the chat box that I'm reading. So Dr. Vishandass has a chair. I leave it to you. Whom
Yes.
you want, what they should answer.
Yeah, of course, the question are such that I'm sure every panelist would like to answer. But before I request Professor Gopal, I just will very small comment. One has to be one has to bear in mind that MSP is an instrument of pricing, not of income. So one has to be very clear because it has different purpose. It has instrument. It gives the signal to the market what to produce, and if we make it guaranteed, then it means the production will not be in sync with the demand. And then what we will do with those excess production, there will be no buyer. It will be a wastage of domestic resource cost. And I concede and I acknowledge farmers are in distress, undoubtedly financially, but there are better methods to address that issue. So with these few words, I would request first Professor Gopal Naik to kindly give his considered view on these issues.
Yeah, I'm also in of the same opinion that MSP is not a solution, not a panacea for agricultural problems today. In fact, this is basically one should look at it as a short-term measure. In most other, commodities, the government comes and procures only when there is a very clear situation where the prices are very, very low. And under those conditions, in order to recover the sunk cost of the farmer, the government can come in and help them out. But in usual situation, we should make the markets work. So if markets are made to work properly, if they are efficient, many of these problems will not be there. So in order to make markets work, again, one has to look at both sides of the, issues. One is, of course, from the farmer side. I think farmers collective is the one answer to the, the existing situation, which can take care of both input market inefficiency and the output market inefficiency. Because if there is a farmer collective, many things can be done. So one is you can increase the productivity, you can get better quality inputs so that you have a better output, and you can also value add and sell it in a place where it is giving better profit than the individual small farmers who will be basically selling it to village traders. So farmer collective is one of the most important issue that we need to address, because we in our studies, wherever we have seen a good farmer collective, it is able to solve many problems. Even the scale, scale economies issues and so on. It can, and participating both in the input and output market, it can actually, so it can effectively participate and therefore even streamline the markets. So therefore, I think that's one of the solutions. Then the second thing is, we need to really build a supportive ecosystem by the government side. I think in most of the states, we have really not very effective mechanism by which we can actually take care of some of these problems. For simple things like let's say whether the pesticides are adulterated or not. There has to be a way by which, in fact, these are all governed by the rules and regulations, but the implementation of that is not good. So that's where I think the problem comes in. So farmers end up having high risks and poor quality inputs because of these. The machineries are not able to do their jobs. The other issue is actually public research. I think we need to spend much more money on the public research, because I think the farmers will gain a lot more from the public research than the private research. We seem to have sort of given this task earlier, all the Green Revolution period and 80s and even early 90s and so on. Universities were able to come up with better varieties, better hybrids and so on, and supply it to the seed producers and so on. Today, many of them are in the private sector. That's okay. I think it's good, but the only problem is, if the cost goes up, and if there are no proper way of assessing quality, then there are issues. So that's where I think we need to make markets work properly. And then information. We know that only about 6% of the farmers are able to access information from the government sources, public sources. The private sources, again, there are issues with respect to how good this information will be for the farmers. We have conducted a RCT study where by providing information, you can actually increase the, in case of paddy yield, it was almost 60% increase in the net returns. In case of cotton, it's almost 200% increase in the net returns, because you can actually reduce the cost. You can apply only that amount of fertilizers and other chemicals which are needed. Whereas today we see, very high imbalances in the fertilizer usage. Some are, let's say, urea and other, NP are put in larger quantity, whereas there is a deficit of potassium and so on. So there are also problems of micronutrients. So all these actually lead to low productivity and high risk. And in order to address that, we need to really have not only the farmer collective, but also a system in the government systems which can actually do better job of it, like the agriculture extension, emphasis on agriculture research, and improving the market logistics. Again, most of our regulated markets are not, organizing the exchange or the buying, selling function based on the grade assessment. So unless there is a grade assessment is there, you cannot really link price to the particular grade. And it becomes very difficult to send information to producers that this is the price at which you can sell your produce. So because of these, absence of some of these, the farmers face a lot more issues with respect to productivity as well as risk. Again, our investments in irrigation has gone down. Command areas are not really efficient. Only about the water use efficiency is considered to about 35% or so. And these are issues, they are real issues. When water is in short supply, availability is less, we need to really take extra care in making sure that we are able to manage these resources properly. So these are some of the things. I think there are also technologies available, newer technologies and so on. Some of it can be very effectively used in, let's say, grading and assessment of the produce, because with the, if it can be done very quickly in cost-effective way, you can actually introduce them in the regulated markets. And then the regulated markets become a little more efficient. Then you can see that the farmers actually would like to have, if the prices are up, then they would like to sell it in the open market rather than the MSP, depending on the MSP. So as far as the MSP is concerned, I think C2 cost is actually includes all costs. So that is full cost in economics, what we call as a full cost. So that then there is no need to add 50%. So it has to be, if we are giving a guarantee of price, it can be just at C2 rather than, adding more, because if you add more, then we are unnecessarily creating incentive to produce surplus. And as we know in agriculture, most of these commodities have high inelastic demand. So therefore, if there is a shortage or excess, the prices fluctuate a lot. So if we give high prices, then there will be a lot of, the supply response will be more, surplus will get generated, then again the prices will come down. So instead of facing those problems, one should be very careful about, deciding what is the level of price that we would like to assure for those commodities where especially we are procuring. And of course, in some cases, in order to encourage production, we, like pulses and so on, we can actually do that. So let me stop at this.
Yeah, Professor Gopal, just my one hitch. See, currently I have analyzed across the country, across the year of various crops to the cost, and A2 plus FL plus 50%, which is currently is higher than the C2.
Okay.
So because farmers are now habituated to A2 plus FL plus 50%, and if they are demanding C2 plus 50%, which is understandable because the difference between A2 plus FL and C2 is about 25 to 30% in most crops. So if we, instead of giving C2 and reduce that 50%, they will be worse off. So
yeah, of course, there may be some difference between state to states and so on, depending on the extent of investment that you make, because the interest cost is basically on the investments. If your cost of production is high, with implements and machineries and so on, then that interest cost will be more. But I agree with you. I think that your analysis is.
So thank you, Gopal. You have given wonderful points, and I'm not going to repeat because I have constraint of time, and I'm not going to summarize. Sorry. I would request Professor Dadhich to add something which has not been told by Professor Gopal, so that on the same point which Professor Charan Singh summarized the questions. And then I would request Dr. Narendar to give his thoughts on the point. Over to Dr. Dadhich. Yes. Dr. Dadhich, you seems to be mute. Unmute yourself.
Hello.
Yes.
I made the suggestion for a guaranteed MPS only in case of a two situation. First is when the price goes below the MSP, then it will be applicable. The second is it will be applicable only for those commodities which are in the import list,
Right.
and required for our PDS system. For these, that should be a guaranteed MPS, and not for all the commodities, which is when the price goes below, yes, there is a need, and then government can pay from its resources. And in case of the import list, we want to increase the production. So actually MSP has done the good thing in the increasing the production and giving the remunerative price or the cost of cultivation to the farmers. So to that extent, it's a fine if granted MSP is given. The second point about the C2 price is concerned, I feel that yes, the interest on the investment and the imputed cost of the land should be taken into account. And the point when we say that this includes the interest and this profit portion also. Profit will happen only when there is a price available to them. So even if they are not getting the price, because many farmers are selling their produce at the much below the MSP.
Oh,
I remember in my own village when MSP was this was a 700 rupees for a moong. It was sold in the village at a 500 rupees. And even if they come to bring it to the mandis, there are the nodal agencies which will reject their crops, and finally they have to sell it to the traders, and same commodity is accepted by the traders. So to overcome all these difficulties, in case of a commodities which are in the deficit, we have to give the guaranteed SP.
okay. Thank you, Dr. Dadhich. May I now request Professor Narendar Pani to give his views?
Thank you, Dr. Vishandass. I would just like to go back to the question of MSP and income being different. I understand conceptually, and for an economist, they are fundamentally different. But as far as farmers are concerned, their agricultural market is linked to the labor market, and the income becomes their price in the labor market. And they are functioning with both those markets. And if we can function, any suggestion that comes from the agricultural market alone on MSPs will be evaluated by the farmers in the interconnection between the agricultural market and the labor market. That's a reality, and we can't get away from it. And that's part of the problem that we are seeing. The second point I would like to make is that the MSP has an aspect of forward trading, and I think Dr. Gopal Naik made the point about, or Dadhich, or perhaps both made the point about the futures market not taking off. So the issue really is that farmers also, if they have an idea of what price they will get, they will be able to respond better. And also you will get a less of the crop cycle. We used to have only the sugar cycle, but now virtually every crop has its production and price cycle. So you need to address the futures market issue, not separate from this. And the third point is, even if you look at collectives, the point that once again Dr. Gopal Naik was making about collectives working well, I think one of the reasons why they don't work for the country as a whole is because it's too ambitious, that you're trying to collectivize land, everything. And that requires lots of it gets in lots of complications. I know that, for instance, in Karnataka, they had a funding system for dryland farming. It worked very well as long as it had support from the World Bank. But the moment that support failed or was stopped, it dropped simply because different farmers had different interests in the same system. The returns from the system were different. So I think if you have a collective effort, not so much in terms of a complete collectivization, but in terms of just as a farm management group going to different farms and consolidating their agricultural production, the chances of success are higher. I know people would object that this is a discussion on MSP. Why are you talking about other things? But if I may submit, this cannot be isolated from the other things. In fact, part of the problems we are finding in the differences between the government and the farmers today is that one is talking about agriculture and the other is talking about agriculture plus the labor market. Thank you.
So, Professor Charan, I think the time is almost up, and perhaps I'm sure you make certain announcement. But before that, I would like to extend my sincere.
Dr. Vishandass, I'm sorry I'm intervening. There is There are two beautiful questions which have come up. Would you
Okay.
like to look at the chat box? I would like to attract your attention. See, I'll read it for you. Both are very good.
Okay.
And I
Okay.
think because Dr. Pani is taking a very different stance. And
Right.
as a macroeconomist, he's taking a stance as a policy maker. So, and to some extent, Dr. Dadhich is also taking that stance, right? But let me read this question. Can C2 plus 50, and please remember, I'm not an agriculture economist, so I'm learning here. So I'm reading the question. If you think as a chairman, this is not worthy of your time or your panel, we'll give it up. Can C2 plus 50% be applied to all the crops and not just 23 crops, including all crops will reduce or eliminate the environmental concerns at the same time, it will be beneficial for the farmers' income, and because of the income of farmers are legitimized, so they should also be brought under the direct taxes in this way. It will be beneficial for the government revenues. What is your take on this, sir? This is somebody by the name Abhishek Singh Yadav. And the next one is something I thought, there's one more. We understand that MSP is one of the causes of inflation. Now, I've not thought through this question, but I like the tenor of this question. Can MSP be linked to inflation in reverse sense too? In case of higher inflation, MSP should be reduced, and likewise. This may help contain inflation at the same time, protect farmers for future production, as the cost may come down due to tamed inflation. I think there's a ratchet effect, and this question may not make all that sense, but you being agriculture economist and you being former chairman of CACP may know better. The last question I had in mind was how to tackle, and this problem was flagged today by Professor Gopal Naik in a big way, how to tackle the regional disparities. Though the question is caused by MSP, I would say how to tackle the regional disparities in terms of input pricing also. Because
See,
Professor Gopal Naik made that point very strongly in the beginning.
yeah, let me add, I mean, all three, and then of course I will request others to give their final comment. So let me start with this. Now C2 plus 50%. The question is not which cost you are taking. The question is the principle, whether you take A2 plus FL or C2. The logic is same. Only the quantum of MSP changes, but C2, if we do the C2 plus 50% instead of A2 plus FL, which is prevailing now, it will impact the MSP by almost 40%, because it will be, according to my calculation, it will be in the range of 37.5% to 45% increase in MSP if we simply move from A2 plus FL to C2. That is point one. Second, on direct taxes, let me make it very clear. In the seventh schedule of the Constitution of India, in the list one, which is the union list, and it gives the government can levy the income tax on incomes other than agriculture. That means government of India is not, it is not within the purview of government of India to levy tax on agriculture. They cannot. It is in the state list. Therefore, it is for the state. And that should be very clear, because many people I have heard that why not, there are many prosperous agriculture farmers, why not they are being taxed and so on and so forth. I say it's our constitution. The government cannot change the items which are listed in the union list. So that is the second point. And third is, the question of inflation does not arise, I mean MSP linking with the, because in the terms of reference are the determinants of MSP. There are 7 factors on the basis of which MSP is recommended by CACP. One of them is the trend in domestic and international prices of that commodity. So CACP takes into account what is the trend in the prices. So that is factored in while recommending the MSP, and MSP is decided for different crops, 23 in 5 times in a year, for Kharif, Rabi, then then sugar, cotton, copra, and so on and so forth. So those are the 5 times, and government also does CACP. That means CCA. They do they announce the minimum support price well before sowing season of that particular commodity, so that farmer get enough time to plan their production system and production ecosystem. So those factors are taken care of. And final point is, under MSP is one of the so this inflation is taken and the C2 cost is there, but C2, it has been extensively discussed. Let me also once again, even at the cost of this, because so many government has appointed so many committee, starting from Hanumanta Rao, then Abhijit Sen's father was there, SR Sen report, then Abhijit Sen himself, Professor Allah, and everybody, they came on the conclusion that C2 is not the right cause for determining the MSP. And I agree to that. And finally, one has to keep in mind the MSP is the minimum, and it is an instrument of setting the price, but not of the income. You cannot achieve the objective of augmenting the income through the instrument of pricing. And if government is willing, government can, there are so many other ways. On one just example we gave, that government can always give some predetermined amount on the per hectare basis. That is the better way. And because one has to produce, and Gopal Naik, I'm very happy he raised the point of productivity. Now productivity is not all about producing more from less resources. Productivity means, to my mind, is producing those things which the society has value for it. If I don't need rice, why should I? And just for the information, my own calculations show that for producing 1 kg of rice, it consumes about 1500 to 2000 liters of water. And for sugar cane, per kg of sugar, it consumes about 3000 liters of water, and that is the water guzzling, water thirsty crop. How can we set those things in order if we on, I mean, across the board allow MSP to be guaranteed? So that is, but nevertheless, I have full sympathy and full empathy with the farmers. They are indeed in the distress. No denying of that fact, because government data show that their income level are much less compared to the non-agriculture workers, and therefore there is a case that their farmers' income has to be augmented. No doubt about that. This should not be misunderstood as if we are advocating or we are making out a case for not conceding to this. Yes, their demand for augmenting the income is genuine and must be supported, but by different instrument. That is all I wanted to say. So I would request Professor Gopal and all the 3 panelists, Narendar, Pani, and Dadhich, to just give the last quick comment on these issues. And these are and then we'll give the floor to the CEO of EGROW, Professor Charan Singh. Yeah, Professor Gopal.
Yeah, as we have discussed, distress in farming sector is very well recognized because of various factors, particularly the inputs and output markets are not working very well, and the productivity is not really increasing at the rate that we expect. And because of that, the farm incomes are not really growing. And it is getting manifested into demanding for a permanent or a guaranteed MSP and so on. So therefore, the solution is not MSP or higher MSP, because higher MSP will always lead to problems. And it has been the experience of every other country. In fact, countries have moved away from giving MSP. But we can selectively provide MSP for those commodities which are actually used in PDS system, because the other systems cannot work very well. Just announcing MSP without procurement will not work. All kinds of other things will happen, and very high MSP will also lead to surplus, and leading to wastages, and it will also depress prices. And those farmers who cannot actually sell it to the procurement agency will end up selling very low prices, and so on. So therefore, MSP is not the solution for every situation. It could be restricted to only those commodities which are being procured, and it could be announced for other commodities, these 23 commodities and so on, at a cost, at a full cost level. That is either C2 or A2 plus FL plus 50% as it is being done today. So, but the important thing is we need to think about solving the agriculture problems that are confronting today through farmer collectives like FPOs and so on, as well as some of the supportive system that are required in order to make the input and output market function properly. I'll stop at this. Thank you.
Yes, Professor Dadhich, just final comment.
I would like to mention address the question of the inflation and MSP. Actually, MSP has nothing to do with the MSP is the cost of cultivation plus some other consideration. There are 7 considerations which last has already mentioned. The international and domestic prices and so many other things. The demand and supply and so many other considerations are there. So at least in any of the MSP, cost of cultivation is there. That component is very much there. So it is not going to impact the inflation or create the inflation. So this is the one point. Another point I would like to mention about the this regional disparities in the prices. Professor Naik has addressed that point. I also mentioned in our my presentation, which I submitted to the EGROW, that there should be address this issue. But since Professor Das, his son was there, so I do not want to show a blame to the son. The problem was that I suggested that there is a need for a decentralized CACP. And it should have some statutory powers. So I did not want to have any controversy on this point, so I skipped that point while making my presentation. But since this issue has come, so average price of the commodity or then deciding the MSP, rather it should be the price at the regional level. And MSP for the regional, today what we have observed, that goods from the, or say, wheat and rice from the Bihar and eastern UP is sold in the mandis of the Haryana, because there is a higher MSP is available to them, and the traders are able to force purchase that goods. So these incidences are there. So if we are going to have the MSP at the regional level, this will also serve the purpose.
Perfect. Now, yes, thank you. And Dr. Narendar, Pani, your last comment on this.
I'll just be very brief and I think and comment only on the issue of regional disparities. It's one thing to talk about, as Professor Dadhich has quite correctly done, about the need for more localized systems of price of MSP if it's there to be there. But it's also important to recognize that if you're looking at the country as a whole, if you have, as Dr. Naik pointed out, costs that are 3 times in one region, 3 times that of another region, then it brings down the overall approach. You need to work out systems where you're completely inefficient. You move out of that agriculture. right? Or you find ways of improving those efficiency, maybe through farm management systems or whatever. But that is actually at the heart of this problem. That if actually you have a situation where large numbers of farmers are extremely poor and they are stuck in agriculture, then it is, I think, a part of a policy to also consider whether they can be given options where they don't have, which are non-agricultural. I think we need a larger policy, and to see the agriculture market, and to repeat, to see the agricultural market independently of the labor market, I think is a serious problem in the current Indian situation. Thank you.
Yeah, let me add, Chanan, one last point. On the regional basis, what CSCP does, they work out the cost per plot. They have the sample size across the states, and as it always happens, the cost varies from plot to plot, the farmer to farmer, state to state, and region to region. Now, it was very vociferously debated in CSEP, within CSEP, and those experts, and right from Dharam Narayan's days, because those are documented in CSEP, who was a pioneer in his own days, in late 60s and early 70s. And then it was decided, if CSEP recommends MSP on state basis or region to region or zone to zone, it will create more chaos, because there will be so many malpractices, and the government don't have the wherewithal to police where the goes, because suppose some areas where the cost of production is low, obviously the MSP will be low, and therefore the people will sell to the areas where it will be high. So it is not workable from pragmatic and from the administrative point of view, and it was considered pros and cons. I can see the point those people, because when you work out the weighted average all India level, then some farmers are producing at higher than that, because by definition average will be somewhere in the middle. Some people will be producing at higher than the all India average cost, and some will be producing at lower, and then the farmer question that CSCP's cost is not correct because they are producing at higher. But that is true of all the data. And therefore, in the wisdom of the government and those experts of those days, and I was party to that, it was decided that it has to be one price for one commodity for a year, for that particular season. And all the pros and cons were discussed for many days. It's not that this has escaped their attention, and it will create more problem than solving the issue. But I can concede, still, if those farmers for some reason they are able to produce at higher cost than the average, they can be separately taken care of by some incentive on regional basis. That can be done, because that is very sure. But how you stop in this 2024 the movement of the grains from one state to another? Then there will be so many corruption and malpractices if you are monitoring that. So those are the issue one has to keep in mind. And overall, it will be in the national interest to have one MSP for each commodity for the whole nation. Over to now, I request Professor Charan Singh to wind it up, and perhaps he has certain announcement to make. So over to Professor Charan Singh.
Thank you very much, Dr. Vishandass. This is an absolutely fantastic discussion that we have had on a contemporary issue. Thank you for chairing the session, and thank you for enlightening us as to what was being discussed in the corridors when you were at the helm of affairs. I don't think we could have had a better discussion on MSP than this. We have had a panel, a very rich panel. Each panelist has brought a different version on the table. And I just want to thank each one of you for sharing your thoughts, sharing your opinion and research, and sharing your experience with us. As you noticed, each of the panelists was very experienced and have brought the rich expertise that they have to this discussion today. So I want to thank you. I want to thank the panelists. I also want to thank the participants who have asked such focused questions, which has enriched our discussion. Next week, firstly, the recording of this discussion will be available on our website tomorrow, and I'm sure it is going to be used extensively. And I am happy if you want to share it with all your friends and other experts, because this has brought out various and articulated very well various issues related to MSP. So I want to thank you, and I would request you to please use this recording tomorrow. And I'm sure it'll benefit many, many people. It'll benefit the media. It'll probably benefit the farmers. It'll probably benefit the policymakers, the negotiators. I think it has lots of implication, this discussion that we have had today. Next week, we are working on the Finance Commission. Actually, today and next week was dedicated to Finance Commission, but because of the urgency of this topic, we brought it ahead. Next week, we are discussing the Finance Commission, and I would like to invite you, same time, would like to invite you to also participate in that discussion. I'm sure it will be very, very useful. As you know, EGROW Foundation is working towards economic literacy. So we do run classes almost every day on some contemporary issue or the other. These are meant for scholars, researchers, policymakers. These are also meant for people from the media who want to update themselves. And the issues that we take up under economic learning is on macro concepts, Indian economy, contemporary issues, financial issues and markets, and then issues on IBC or the issues which pertain to the lawyer profession when they are handling economic cases. I would like you to please look up our website and enroll and take benefit of those courses which are being taught by very senior retired experts from elite universities and elite institutions in our country. With that, let me conclude. Let me first of all once again thank each one of you, wish you a great weekend, and look forward to your presence next week. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much to all panelists, Professor Charan, and all the viewers and listeners. Thank you. I really enjoyed. Yes, great.
Thank you very much.